Back briefly to the referendum in Turkey, where the decision to give President Recep Erdogan new sweeping powers has been described as the most important reforms in the country's history. He narrowly won the vote, the probity of which is disputed by opposition leaders. And let's bring in Michael Daventry, London-based Turkish journalist and commentator on Turkish current affairs. Michael, welcome to you. Opposition press conference in the last hour and a half or thereabouts. They're deeply unhappy about this.
Yes, they are deeply unhappy. In my memory, this is the first time ever, really, that a Turkish opposition party hasn't conceded a defeat in a Turkish election setting. I mean, the usual drill is normally that the AK party wins, that the opposition loses, and they say it's a fair cop, we haven't managed to connect with the populace. But this time, they're talking about electoral fraud, they're talking about things going very seriously wrong, and they're not saying that they've lost.
And in terms of the acts of alleged electoral fraud that we're talking about, in particular people not voting in private.
That's part of it. I mean, if you'll bear with me, it's slightly technical, but the way that voting works in Turkey is by stamping. They give you a piece of paper, the left-hand side says yes, the right-hand side says no, and a voter stamps their choice on the left or the right-hand side of the paper. But that ballot paper also needs to carry an official seal. That seal is from the president of the polling station, the person who's in charge of running things around that ballot box. And what the election authorities in Turkey said yesterday, just as the ballot boxes were closing, was that any ballot that doesn't carry that official seal will be still considered valid, and that notionally means that somebody could at home have printed reams and reams of ballot papers, pre-stamped them yes, and then forced them into people's hands as they entered the ballot box, which does infringe on the privacy of the ballot box and makes that result potentially not healthy.
Assuming for a moment that this result stands, what does it tell us about the existing and arguably growing divisions within Turkish society? Because you've got a situation where he did badly in the big metropolitan areas, in cities like Izmir, Ankara, Istanbul. In rural Anatolia, a different story. He did far better.
He did. I don't really envisage a situation in which it can't stand. He won. He needed 50% of the vote plus one, and he got 51%. So President Erdogan is on course now to become the next executive, or the first executive president in Turkey. But you're quite right to say that this is a deeply, deeply divided country. We're talking on Brexit standards of division here, because a huge, huge minority of people, at least unofficially, didn't vote for this. And this is a change that will be bringing sweeping powers to the presidency, the result of which will be changing the countries in ways that it can't really be recognised.
Well, and also part in a bigger global story, Michael, you could argue, because there are people who say, look at the way the world's going right now. You've got a new Tsar in Russia. In Turkey, you've got a new Sultan.
The word sultan has been used a lot. There's a line of thinking, not one that I support, but have heard it being reported, that this is actually a good thing for Turkey to have a strong authoritarian leader who's in control. From a Western perspective, from a British or from an American perspective perhaps, it's more the devil that we know. We know who we're trading with here, we know who we're dealing with. And when it comes to such unpredictable regimes like Syria and Iraq and Iran right on Turkey's border, at least we know it might not be democratic, but the person in Turkey is the person that we know and can actually deal with. But that completely ignores the fact that there's a huge minority and possibly a slim majority of people in Turkey who didn't vote for this system, but they're getting it anyway.
Fascinating stuff. Michael Daventry, really good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed for your time.
Thanks
a lot. The sports next with Roger.